It's been a long-held belief that boys speak later than girls. And recently, there have been studies that come out that says there's no real difference. In this episode, we're going to unpack both ideas, explain why the confusion exists, and, of course, give you practical strategies for what you can do at home for both boys and girls. Does your child have a speech-language delay and you really want them to talk? Do difficult behaviors derail home life and you know the frustration is a communication struggle? Does your child see a speech therapist and you wonder, what do they do and how can I help? If these or similar questions are in your mind, this podcast is for you. Hello, my name is Dinalynn Rosenbusch. I am a speech-language pathologist that has worked with children from birth to 21 for 3 decades. And in my classrooms, I see you wanting to connect with the heart of your child, but their speech and language skills create a barrier. So if you have a kiddo that has difficult behaviors, needs to expand their language or learn to say speech sounds, and maybe even receives speech therapy, stay tuned, because in this podcast, you will learn how to use your daily life as a tool to communication practice and how to do that practice. You will become confident knowing you are making the difference you want to make. And you will hear success stories of parents who have navigated these struggles already. We'll do this all while focusing on building deep, meaningful connection and confidence in your kiddo. So grab a cup of coffee along with a notebook and pen. It's time to speak in the way your child's brain understands. And that is the language of play. Welcome back, and before we begin, I want to give a shout out to my sponsors. So thank you to the Center for Play and Exploration. Feeling stuck? Burned out? Lost your spark? The Center for Play and Exploration helps you flip that script. Because joy isn't just for kids. Parents, you can get your spontaneity back, one playful thought at a time. Use the link in the notes and mention the language of play and score 20% off. And hey, if you need an inspiring speaker, ask for Dave. He does great. The next sponsor is Lightning Admin VA. Nap time is precious, but if you're spending it answering emails and fixing tech issues, it's not really a break. Cindy at lightningadminva.com can help. She is a virtual assistant who takes care of the behind-the-scenes business tasks, so you can use that time for the moments that really matter. So a big shout-out thank you to these 2 sponsors. Now, I have a great resource for you, parents, and it's free. Take a look in the show notes. If listening is a daily struggle in your home or your classroom, whether it's because of ADHD, language delays, speech challenges, or even just strong-willed kids, you are not alone. And that is why I created a free resource called 5 Ways to Get Your Kids to Listen Better. These are practical strategies you can start using today. They work not just for parents, but also for teachers, childcare workers, and even, believe it or not, some adults tell me that they do it with their spouse, and it works there too. You can grab it in the show notes. All right, let's now get into today's episode. For years and years and years, we have known that boys develop later than girls. I've heard this since I was young, in school, in college, everywhere. That's what we've seen. So how is it now that people can say, there's no difference? Well, let's talk about that first. Side A is the traditional clinical side, which states on average, girls develop some speech sounds and vocabulary a little earlier. Boys are referred more often for speech and language delays. On side B, we have the recent headlines saying that differences are tiny and not meaningful clinically, or that the prior findings were biased, and therefore there is no statistical significance. In an effort to not have you confused by these seemingly opposite positions, I'm going to explain why both can potentially be right, but what also actually matters for your child. Because some of you are studiers, I'm going to be putting links in the show notes this time for where you can read some of the research. There's some interesting readings that I did on my way to challenge these ideas before I came to this episode. ASHA is the American Speech Language Hearing Association, and that is the gold standard for us speech pathologists here in the United States. You will see a link from them. You will also see a link from Science Daily and from ResearchGate and PubMed. There were many articles that I saw, but I think that 4 is probably enough. And if any of you do want to have more sightings because you are interested and curious, just write me at hello@thelanguageofplay.com, and I will be happy to give you the rest of the research I found. But for this episode, we're going to really just dive into 4. Why do people argue? What are the causes of the conflicting claims? So let's look at the way we measure the timing in life when children get sounds. And let's also take a look at the social and environmental factors that shape how caregivers talk to the children. First, measurement. ASHA says that the way we measure boys and girls is different based on our perception of their vocal emotion. And this shows up then in how we understand what the child meant by vocabulary. So we might give a girl credit for vocabulary that we don't give that credit to the boy for. They've also noticed measurement differences in conversational turns, where they notice that, again, based on vocal emotion of the child, we perceive that a girl is taking turns more often in conversation with us when they, especially like pre-speech and early speech. And then they are getting certain sounds a little bit faster, correct. And then the diagnostic rates are influenced because of how we perceive what the children are doing based on their vocal emotion. If you nerd out on studies, this is a fun one to read. You'll find it in the show notes. Science Daily says that there are small differences that are happening between girls and boys, but they did a huge study and they found that boys in the first year of life make more vocalizations and word-like sounds along with other non-word-like sounds in that first year than girls. However, in the second year of life, girls' skills pass up boys by the end of that second year. That is another fun study to read how it flips, and that would be from Science Daily. You'll find that too in the show notes. This tells the timing of skills. ResearchGate puts out a study that tells you how caregivers respond differently to children based on the expectations that they have for them. This means that the child, boy or girl, is shaped by the expectations and activities done by the caregivers in their environment. The bottom line, what is it that you actually need to know? And that is this. On average, there are small differences. Girls are slightly earlier on some measures, and boys are more often identified with delays. But the individual difference is much larger than the difference overall with boys and girls. For example, your boy might be out talking your girl. This would be an individual family difference, and these differences are what we see commonly, and this is where they seem to be larger. If you take the group of boys nationally and the group of girls nationally, you're comparing a lot more kids, and when you're comparing the group, you see a much smaller overall average. This was the bottom line that came from PubMed, and I like it. McCarthy, the researcher, said this: "These differences are seldom statistically significant, but the careful observer cannot ignore the amazing consistency with which small differences appear in one investigation after another, each being conducted by a different experimenter employing different techniques on different subjects and sampling different geographical populations. What he is saying is, yes, there are differences, and it's not statistically significant, but it is consistent across experimenters, techniques, subjects, and populations. Let's tease out those differences even further. Time differences, and that would be like the speed of hitting a milestone. And this is first words, combining words, things like that. Often, but not always, girls are a bit earlier. Let's look at quality difference. That would be the clarity of speech, the complexity of the grammar, how well the social interaction is being used. Those studies show that girls have some small advantages. They are small, but they are definitely there. And third, let's consider the content difference. That would be the content of what your child is actually trying to say or saying, the type of words or what topics they're talking about, play versus descriptive words, things like that. And this is often shaped by the interaction style. This is what they are exposed to more than their natural biology. This part is how the caregivers play with them, how you play with them. Somewhat, they're choosing their toys. We know that boys do often choose trucks, but girls do too. And if we interact more on trucks with the boys, but we don't interact as much with trucks with the girls, the boys will naturally talk about trucks more and the girls will naturally lessen. This is the nature versus nurture, and this would be a nurture situation. So the content differences are driven more by what we do with our kids. But the time, which is the speed of hitting a milestone, or the quality, which is the clarity and complexity, those are slightly stronger and quicker with girls. So having said all that, what are the practical strategies that you can use? What are simple, evidence-based, language enrichment moves that you can do with your kids for both typical kids and delayed kids? Let's start with some focal points that are specific to boys. Let's make sure we increase our conversational turns, giving them a little prompt and waiting for them to respond, allowing their attempts to be acknowledged as a real attempt at turn taking. As you increase your expectation for back and forth conversation with them, they will respond with that back and forth communication and boost their language growth along the way. With boys, too, we want to use play-based, high-interest routines. Many boys respond well to action and movement kinds of play in their context. So if you use that play-based, high-interest movement, name it, model the sentences, that's particularly effective with boys because we do know our boys tend to move around more. A third thing for boys is to build clear sound models. Don't use heavy drill and practice. That's not effective for our little kids, but rather use short, frequent practices embedded in their play where you are giving them really clear sound models. So when you're speaking, you're enunciating slowly, deliberately to the boys as you're speaking. Visual supports and gestures are really helpful for boys to build up language as well, adding pictures so that they have the 3D, the 2D, and blending it all together. Now, I say this for boys, not because we don't need to do it with girls, but because this is where caregivers will sometimes drop the ball with boys because they don't have the expectation in these arenas. Now let's think about some specific strategies for girls. We want to encourage our girls to have a diverse way of talking, to take risks, to use new vocabulary, because girls sometimes get praised for being quiet or for being nice, which can reduce their ability to explore and use language and their bodies in space and time. We want to encourage our girls to be risk takers. Another thing we want to do specifically with girls is to push for complex language, asking open-ended questions of them so that they expand on their sentences and introduce we can introduce new descriptive words to them. When they expand on their sentences and we give them new descriptive words, we are giving them power to express themselves and to really tell what they're thinking. Also with girls, we want to watch for subtle grammar issues or comprehension gaps. Ask for a screening if you have any doubts, because girls tend to get by, because if they're nice and they're quiet, we don't necessarily detect the problem the way we detect it with boys, because they tend to be louder and more moving. So keep your radar up with girls. And again, these two I teased out because of our cultural way that we treat boys and girls differently, so that we can give the strength in the areas where culturally a little less strong. Now let's think about some universal strategies for all children. Talk throughout your day. Narrate what your child is paying attention to. Narrate what they're doing. Give them labels for the things they're playing with. Expand their sentences by a word or two when you want to teach them how to expand their sentence length. Work towards 6 to 10 quality conversational turns when you're interacting. And what that means is you say something and they say something on the same topic back to you. And then you respond to what they said, they respond to what you said. And each time somebody speaks, it's a conversational turn. But we don't want a turn to just be a shrug or a look. Those are not quality turns. We want to shoot for 6 to 10 quality turns. Quality being the content of what the child is saying. The second universal strategy for all kids is to follow the child's lead. Join their play. Build language on what they care about, what they are paying attention to. The third thing, model and expand and recast how your child is speaking. So if the child says, dog run, you can say, yes, the big dog is running fast. You are giving more. In that example, you gave a lot more. And if your child is very young, you might just expand dog run to, yes, the dog is running. The use of books is the fourth thing I will bring up. And that shared reading experience draws you and your child to attend to the same things at the same time. And there's multiple, like thousands of ways to use a book to build language. Also, our children learn other skills such as following, wait, or tell me more, expand, ask me, or you asking them a question. A lot of that interaction naturally occurs within a book as you talk about the pictures. The fifth thing, for your kids with unintelligible speech, that means it's difficult to understand, use regular speech sound practice routines with your kids. Short momentary times. You might pair it with meals, or pair it with bath, or pair it with toileting time, or washing hand time. When you have a repeated event throughout the day, it helps you to have many practices within the day, and you will be able to embed target practice into those routines as the day goes along naturally. And the sixth thing for all children all the time is if you have a concern that persists and you've looked at those milestones and you think, I'm not so sure. I encourage you to talk to a speech language pathologist, whether that is through your doctor's office, your school, or by contacting me at hello@thelanguageofplay.com. Get yourself a professional conversation where you are able to explain what you see and is going on. And even if what's going on with your child isn't something that's necessarily going to qualify, meaning they're not bad enough that they're going to get speech therapy services, I still encourage you, for you, mamas and dads, and caregivers and teachers, to build the skills so that you can continuously grow your kiddos. You see, many of those kiddos, if we give them what they need as parents and caregivers, they don't continue to be lagging behind more and more and more until they qualify in a speech pathology program. But rather, if when they're very young, we jump in ahead of them being so far behind. then they never get far behind. Of course, this isn't true for all children, but for many kids, it absolutely works. And in this situation, I really encourage you to call me at the Language of Play, because that is what we specialize in, helping parents to help their kids. And the earlier you jump in, the easier it is to make change. Well, families, I hope this was very helpful for you, and I would love to hear your feedback. Did you agree? Did you disagree? Have you had this experience, or have you not had this experience? There are many links in the show notes today, so others of you that geek out on this kind of stuff like me can read some of the research. And if you are simply concerned, just want to talk about what's going on with your parent, also look in the show notes and you can book a call. I look forward to hearing from you in whichever way you decide to connect. Hey parents, I hope you found this episode helpful. If so, would you please take 30 seconds and share it with a friend who also lives or works with children? I would really appreciate it if you would leave a quick review for the show on Apple Podcasts. I read every review, and it lights me up to know that this show is making a difference. Then come join my Facebook community, where you'll meet other parents who are dedicated to helping their children grow too. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thank you for joining me. Now it's time to go. Let's pop our kiddos in the strollers and go look around outdoors and see what we have to talk about.